population estimates, well, the decennial census in 2010 and again in 2020 includes a some other race category, and most of the people who choose that category also identify as Latino, and you can see that there are two different questions on the census as well as the ACS. First, are you Hispanic or Latino? And then next, what is your race? Mark one or more boxes. So there are plenty of people who are Hispanic or Latino who also identify one or more races, but many include some or more race. But the population estimates that the Census Bureau does have reallocated those some other race categories into one of the major races. And in a state like Oregon, where most of the Latino population is from Mexican background, the people who do identify a race most frequently identify as white. So most of these people who identify as some other race get reallocated as white in the Census Bureau's population estimates. And we'll see how that can cause some confusion. So if there's been a lot of there's always a lot of questions about race statistics, and especially in this year of seeking justice for the African American population. Black Lives Matter. We've got a lot of inquiries about the black population of Oregon, for example. So if you simply go to the Census Bureau's homepage, which a data user who's not too familiar with census data might do, if you just put Oregon in the search window, it returns a link to the Census Bureau's tool called Quick Facts, and that includes race and ethnic percentages. And a journalist for OPB, Jeff Mapes, formerly of the Oregonian and Oregon Live, he contacted me because it shows the first link in Quick Facts shows the white population of Oregon as 87%, which seems pretty high. There's also a white non-Latino line of 75.1%. So I really, if you want to learn more about the differences, this article, it turned out to be really good. The black percentage of Oregon in Quick Facts is 2.2%. But turns out you could hear a lot of different numbers cited about what is Oregon's black or African American population. Every year there are several different numbers that come out published by the Census Bureau, and the population estimates come out in June. The American Community Survey 1-year estimates in September, and the 5-year estimates in December. So reason for so many numbers is because they produce estimates for race alone or in combination, and race with or without Hispanic or Latino. So that table is just an example of the different numbers that are out there, all current numbers, because the 2019 5-year estimates haven't been released yet. So any of these numbers could be cited, and people like the race alone because then they can add up all the categories to 100%, but it really makes a difference. So when people are looking for an African American population, I encourage them to use African American alone or in combination, the most inclusive number. And now that we have not cleared that up, what the ACS is really most useful for is characteristics of the population, things that we can't necessarily get from the decennial census. and we get new data every year. And I'm going to talk just briefly about just a few topics and show you some highlights for 2019. The first one is household type. And we do get this data from the decennial census, and so we can compare back. The questions are pretty comparable because there's a wealth of information, many, many tables that are generated from the simple question of how is this person related to person one? So person one, if there's only one person in the household, you put your information in on the census. If there's more than one, then they're referred to as person one, person two, person three, etc. in the American Community Survey. So that data is available from the decennial census as well as the ACS. Next is poverty, and naturally the ACS does not ask people, are you in poverty? But what it is a combination of two different questions. One is income, and the other is family size. So as you may know, the poverty thresholds are updated every year. They're the same nationally, whether you live in an expensive community or a cheap community, and they are based on the number of people in your family. So that results in some pretty high margins of error because there's sampling error involved in both of those questions, the family income and family size. So for small geographic areas, sometimes you see poverty estimates that may or may not be reliable. Health insurance was added in the late 2000s, and great source of information. And finally, migration. The Census Bureau the ACS has a question, where did you live 12 months ago? And that could be in a different house in the same county, a different county, different within the same state, a different state, or abroad. And here, because we're dealing with the entire state of Oregon, I'm going to show you movement in and out of Oregon between other states. Of course, the Census Bureau does estimate in their population estimates international out-migration, but or net migration, but because the ACS is only done in the U.S., we can't get international out-migration from the ACS. So first, I like to take a very long view, and I'm always astonished by this chart showing that Oregon has added about 1.1 million households in the last 60 years. However, the bottom category, married with children, has barely changed relative to total number of households. The 276,000 in 2019 is barely higher than the number 60 years ago, and now represents a much smaller percentage of all households, down from about 43% to about less than 15% of all households. Biggest growth has been in other family households, and about 500,000 of those now are married couples without children. It could also be single-parent families with children. They could be multi-generation families without children. Another huge growth is the living alone category, up nearly 5 times over the 60-year period, and now approaching 500,000 Oregonians. And then finally, other non-family households. This would be roommate situations, etc. And I've put the table numbers there on the chart for where you can find this data. From the same tables, this is comparing the U.S., Oregon, and the city of Portland. And interesting fact here, now in 2019, more than 1/3 of all households in the city of Portland are people living alone. And many of those are 65 and over. Big growth in the number of people 65 and over living alone over the period shown in this chart. And in fact, since 2000, the number of men 65 and over living alone in Oregon has doubled, more than doubled. It has increased more than 50% since 2010. And a lot of this is due to the fact that the baby boom cohort is now moving up into the 65 and over age group. Poverty rate, the official poverty rate for the United States is published not by the American Community Survey, but it is published from the Current Population Survey, a much smaller sample survey that the Census Bureau also administers. But that data is not available for small geographic areas, so in order to make comparisons, we have to use the American Community Survey, which shows interesting facts that early on in this past decade, Oregon's poverty rate was significantly higher than the U.S. And by 2019, that has flipped, and Oregon now has a statistically significantly lower poverty rate than the U.S. And our economist friends could probably confirm that Oregon was hit hard by the Great Recession and took a long time to start adding jobs and catching up with income, but the strong recovery in the middle of this decade, in which Oregon added more jobs as a percentage, it added jobs at a faster rate than the U.S., as well as having income growth at a faster rate than the U.S. It's probably what contributed to bringing this poverty rate down. Likewise, child poverty was similar to the U.S. in early part of the last decade, and by 2019 was significantly lower than the U.S. Here we can see the results of Oregon embracing the Affordable Care Act in the middle of the last decade, where big drop between 2013, when nearly 15% of Oregonians were without health insurance, down to 6.2% in 2016, and I can't tell you why it's crept up a little bit since 2016, but it seems to have done that. That may be a concern, and there may be a good explanation for it. And then a topic that's always interesting to us in Oregon, because as Huda mentioned, most of our growth comes from year after year more people moving in to the state than moving out. There's very few years in the last, in the last century or more that more people have left Oregon than moved to it. But we can see the slowing, consistent with our population estimates. The biggest growth due to net migration was in 2013 through 2017, and that has tailed off a bit in 2018 and 2019. So I picked the year 2017, where there was the biggest gap between in-migration and out-migration, and looked at a couple of tables from the ACS. And we can see for young adults age 18 to 34, significantly more people moving into Oregon from other states than leaving Oregon, based on where people lived in when they responded to the ACS in 2017. However, by 2019, for most age groups, the number of in-migrants had reduced from 2017, and the number of out-migrants had increased. So there's still positive net migration for most age groups, but that has narrowed considerably. So we're going to have time for questions at the end.